What is up, all you GBA top people? This is Tom. I'm here to bring you guys my Week 9 match against John and his New Orleans Pelippers. John has been a very good friend of mine throughout the long history of the GBA. And this will be our first rematch across our 3 rematches against John, Necro, and Mono. Going into this match, I know there's a lot of pressure to obviously repeat the win that I got off of him in week 3, I want to say, and I also know that my personal vendetta is that I want to get as many W's against John up until when he ends up leaving the GBA at the end of this season. So my team, I didn't do team builder yesterday, but what I'm going to start doing is if I don't do a team builder for the video, I am going to leave a PokePaste as the top link in the description, and then explain the team briefly and let you guys follow along if you choose to look at the link below. So like I said, link's going to be there. The team that I brought this week is going to be Landorus, Rotom, Swellow, Meloetta, Rhyperior, and Scizor. Now in this order, I'm gonna talk about them, maybe a little bit scattered, but first up we have Landorus. This is going to be a pretty much a max HP, max defense, a little bit of speed. I think enough speed to creep a Cresselia that's going to outspeed a Jolly Scizor. But it's going to be carrying Earthquake, Knockoff, HP Ice, and Stealth Rock. The point of this is going to be for a Garchomp, as well as potentially something like, I don't know, Hariyama. I mean, it's not going to be pivoting, but, Earthquake, getting a Brox, knocking off some key items like AV on Hariyama, or something along those lines. I know he's not going to... He may hard switch Piloswine in against it, but I doubt it, knowing that if he doesn't see knockoff. And I like to use this early on just to scout out, moves against a lot of his team. The problem with this is that it does get hit really hard. I know I could knock, if he brought Torn or Scavalier, I can knock off AV from either of them. And I think overall this was just a relatively safe bring. I don't want to bring an offensive type again. And as a matter of fact, I didn't want to bring a lot of the same sets I brought last time, because then I know John would counter how he lost to then prep to win this time if I'd bring 5, 6 of the same mons, the same sets. I do believe firmly that it's harder in the rematch for the winner to win again than it is for the loser to beat the person, especially if they lost early in the season, if that makes sense. All right, next up we have Rotom. Also, item on Lando's going to be leftovers. It's going to be Jolly, like I said, for the speed thing. We have a modest Eopapa Rotom. This is going to be relatively bulky. It's going to be max HP for the most part. Very high defense, 116, 60 SPDF, and then 84 special attack. Modest, dual stab, Hydro, Volt Switch, HP Ice for the Garchomp, and Endure. Now, I say Endure because the idea for this set is to be, for like an early or like a late game check to Garchomp. I need to keep it healthy, and the idea here is to go for the Endure if he is behind a sub. If I get like a Volt Switch out, or if he brings in the Garchomp in against Rotom, expecting me to Volt Switch. If he tries to go for like sub, I could break that with HP Ice. If he tries to beat me, and I predict that with like a Z Outrage or Z Draco, I can go for Endure. I would live the hit. I would be able to get my Papa Berry off, and I'd be able to live the next one, hopefully. Assume if he gets to +2 with like a Swords Dance, I'm fucked. If he is Choice Scarf, I'm fucked. But this is kind of the idea. I'm going a little bit experimental with this team, mostly because I figure if I'm kind of not really in the playoff race, why not, change it up and see exactly what I could play with, what sets could maybe work, and get a little creative, and especially in a rematch, you have to get creative against the person who you may have won against earlier in the season. Next up, we have Scizor. This is going to be a careful, it's basically max def, max HP. With the 60 speed is for a Hariyama, an adamant Hariyama that's trying to outpace or creep a defensive Scizor. So this is going to be carrying an Akaberry to reduce the damage done by things like Heat Wave, Fire Punch, or even HP Fire. The idea for this is actually I'm going to lead with Scizor because it is my best lead, and if I could knock off an Eviolite, an AV, Leftovers, Black Sludge, anything of that nature, it would be great for the long games. I know John is very in love with those items, and I'd like to get rid of the item as soon as possible. It's going to be carrying U-Turn, Bullet Punch, Knockoff, like I said, and Roost. Next up, we have Spec Swellow. This is going to be very straightforward. Max enough speed to outpace, I want to say, Garchomp? No, Diancie. That's right. And max special attack, Timid, Boom Burst, Heat Wave, HP Steel for Deancey, and U-Turn. Very straightforward. This is, you know what this does. It's going to be somewhat of a breaker for the vast majority of his team, and the only thing that outspeeds it is any sort of Scarf user, and of course Jolteon. Next up, we have a Weakness Policy, Jolly, Max Speed, Max Attack, Rhyperior with Solid Rock, and yep. This is going to be Earthquake, Smackdown, Swords Dance, and Rock Polish. Now the idea for this set is, now this is one of the only things that can outspeed like Jolteon at +2, assuming he's not like Quick Feet. But if he's not Quick Feet, I can outspeed it by 1 point with at Jolly Max Speed and a +2 after the Polish. But if he is like a Scarf Chomp, not happening. I'm not outspeeding it whatsoever. And it's gonna have Earthquake and Smackdown. You might think it's a little weird, and Rock Slide or Stonage will be a little bit better. But once I get to +2, assuming I get hit with a super effective move, basically I can pretty much damage and knock out the vast majority of his team. I mean, I need to get rid of the priority from like Piloswine, get rid of the Violate from Piloswine, knock out Hariyama, because obviously Bullet Punch, I know he loves bringing that, especially for Swellow, but I could outspeed, you know, Chomp. I could, for Crest, basically, if he's max HP, max defense, when I get to +2, or if he tries to bring it in, I get to +4, Smackdown gets rid of the Levitate, and then the Earthquake would knock him out. And then finally, we have a sub Calm Mind Meloetta. He's going to be carrying Psyshock and Shadow Ball. And it's going to be timid, enough to outspeed, like I said, the Cresselia trying to outspeed Jolly Scissor. Max HP, very highly invested in special attack, 132, and 68 rest of, you know, the investment into defense. This is going to be for Crest, obviously, and is also, I need to get a +2 basically in order for this thing to work, but I do think it's a very good option for a lot of his special attackers. It can threaten out things like Hariyama and Tentacruel. It can do some good like chip or KO damage to Piloswine. And then, of course, for Jolteon, if I get to like +1 or +2, it's not really going to be doing that much damage. It needs to go for like Electric Move. And yeah, I kind of want to use this for like late game. So that's the team. A little bit long and skip through this. But we're going to go into the match. Like I said, I am going to lead off with Scissor like I had intended. And my idea is to just knock off. If you brought like Torn, if you let off with like Hariyama, if you let off with Garchomp, you know, I could, or even Piloswine. Like Piloswine would be the best lead like he did last time, so that I can ensure that I get rid of it to Violite. But he ends up leading with Tentacruel, which I thought was a little bit strange. Maybe he expected me to lead off with Landorus and try and go for like Scald or Ice Beam to knock out Landorus super early, because I know that was a big problem for him last time. He ends up going for Protect early, and this was annoying just because it's Protect, and it took like 40 seconds to click Protect. But I'm going to go for Knockoff, and right here I already sort of play myself. Now I could go just for double Knockoff, expecting him to go into Hariyama. Or I can go for U-Turn, expecting him to go into Garchomp, and if he has a Z Crystal of whatever nature, I end up just taking rough skin damage. I end up going for U-Turn over predicting, but if I'd gone for Knockoff, I could have got rid of the AV on Hariyama, which you'll see was kind of important in like 3 or 4 turns. But I end up going into Landorus. I get the -1 because I really didn't want to go into Rotom and take a knockoff. Didn't want to go into Rhyperior and lose the weakness policy. He is relatively healthy. And I didn't want to go into Swellow because if he did have AV, like I am 100% expecting, then I could knock it out with Boom Burst. And I don't have Air Stab, and even if I did, I still wouldn't be able to knock it out. So, and then Psyshock from a Meloetta, when it's not boosted up, is doing like 25 to 30% against an AV Hariyama. So I'm going to go for knockoff here. Now I say 3 or 4 turns before because if I got rid of the knockoff, what I could just do is go for Rocks and then end up just going for Earthquake. This would have done upwards of like 30 to like 40%, which would have had allowed me to go into pretty much, I mean, I can go into Swellow, which is what I end up doing, but I also could have went into Meloetta, and I could have threatened him out, and if I predicted him to switch out, knowing he was like lower or in range to get knocked out by a Psyshock, especially without the AV. I know it obviously doesn't really affect it, but I could have started setting up right early, and I would have been at really high HP. So I end up knocking him out with the Boom Burst, and this allows him to get in Piloswine, and right here I could stay in, but I also know that if he goes for Ice Shard, I'm just dead, and that would be a big problem, kind of like, you know, with Wolfie. If I lose one of my premier breakers, then the team becomes that much harder to use. I end up going into Rotom. He's going to go for Stealth Rock. As you guys saw, I don't have Defog this week, but I also know if with Rocks up on his side of the field, he's going to have a little bit of a harder time switching in. I think it would have been more of a problem if he had brought Tornadus, and that thing would have taken 25%. But he ends up going for Toxic. This is going to be a running theme across his team because John is a Toxic boy, and a lot of his mons are going to be running Toxic for this match. I overpredict when I go for Volt Switch. I kind of expected him to go into, I don't know, maybe like Cress, maybe Jolteon, but he ends up. I'm pretty much screwing myself at this point. But I'm gonna go for Hydro Pump against the Tentacruel switch in. I almost went for double Volt Switch there. Would have been a better play. Would have allowed me for much more opportunity. And I was just so scared because he has 2 ground types and Jolteon. So at any point, if I go for Volt Switch and he makes the right prediction, I was just fucked. So I really didn't know where my mind was going to go, where his mind was. I was having a really hard time predicting, and I was over predicting myself. And then right here, when he clicks Protect, like, it went totally over my head as to why he brought this in. Rack up more toxic damage, ensure that I come back in, take toxic damage and rocks damage, and pretty much I'm just playing myself. See, and he does it. Actually, he makes a hard switch, thinking I would go for Volt Switch, but instead, go into Meloetta, and I don't know. I didn't really think of the good reason why I went into this, but I thought it was my best play against Tentacruel. In case he went for Scald, perhaps Ice Beam, maybe predicting a switch, and I kind of wanted to see if I was faster than him, basically because he has the Black Sludge, I had leftovers, maybe I could outspeed him. But he ends up, I go for sub, trying to think I could set up against this Piloswine. Whether he was Impish, no attack investment, or Adamant with full attack investment, he broke my sub. But I just stay in, and then I end up switching out. And this is just his bulk for right now is determining the match, just because I'm not as U-turn heavy as I was last time, and just because the team is a lot more experimental, I want to say. He ends up going for Earthquake. I could have went into Rotom, but then we kind of go into the same problem I had, where I'm already toxic, rocks damage, I have no recovery, and I didn't want to go again to Eopapa range, or I wasn't going to be in Eopapa range. And I'm just going to end up sacking off Scissor here to 2 Earthquakes. I'm already down, I think 4-6 right now, or 4-5 after I got rid of Hariyama. But I'm going to try right here to get in Rhyperior, because without the Violite, I think I could force him to either go for Earthquake, or I can just threaten him out. Maybe he switches out into something, which allows me to get the Rock Polish up. He doesn't end up doing that. He is going to end up going for Toxic. I thought that he would Earthquake, but even during, when we talked post-match, he was like, you were Rock Polish, or you were Weakness Policy, and I said, yeah. And he goes, yeah, I wasn't clicking Earthquake ever. I was like, fuck, man. So I end up getting Toxic, and this is kind of a problem, because now I don't really have any way of stopping, or he's just stopping my sweep outright, which also means that if Garchomp ends up being Scarfed in the back, I can't go for double Rock Polish, when I also need to get the attack boosts to deal with this Cresselia, and then when he does switch out, I get baited, and we're just not really in a very good move, and I move forward. I end up getting smacked down here. I'm not attack invested, and this is just a very long, drawn-out series. He ends up going for Psychic, and like you said, he was never clicking a super effective move against me. So the problem here is that, yes, he's not levitated anymore, but the toxic damage is racking up. He just got 50%, 40% up from the Psychic. I'm not a +2, I'm not a +4, I'm not at anything. So this Rhyperior set is not working. He is going to go into his Piloswine as I go for Earthquake. I'm going to knock it out, which, yippee, something, I don't know. But I end up knocking it out with Earthquake, but this also brings in Tentacruel. And overall, in the back of my head, I was like, well, I know Hariyama's gone, but even if I was to knock out Crest or something, or I knocked out Piloswine, didn't matter, because then he's just going to go into Tentacruel and click Protect, which... my problem, I understand how John was playing, but I also can't help but be annoyed about how I'm losing to this, because I fucking hate toxic stalling. If anyone who knows me and knows how I play and how I like to play, I don't like being toxic stalled. But this is what's going to happen, because we see here that I expect to Protect I think he's going to go, and then he ends up being faster, and I think I end up clicking Side Shock to knock this out, but not before he gets a 3rd fucking Toxic off against me. God damn it. Yeah, half his team is Toxic, and I don't I knocked out Hariyama, and Jolteon is going to be faster. And I thought to myself, I can't click Sub because I saw that he was faster. I didn't want to click Calm Mind because it wouldn't be necessary, and God forbid he went for knockoff or something. I wasn't in a good mood. Well, if I think about it this way, if he had knockoff and he clicked it and then clicked Toxic, that means I didn't have leftovers and I was Toxic before he died to a Psyshock, so it wouldn't really have mattered. And then he goes into Jolteon here, and I really didn't have much left here to do, because Rhyperior was dead, Lando was dead, or Rhyperior was still alive, but even if I went to Rhyperior, I died to rocks, and I come in and he's fast and everything, basically, and I would just, like, at this point I was reeling, and I was really having a hard time getting into, into any sort of rhythm. I think that was pretty much the motif of the match, is that I just had no rhythm, and I didn't have really a plan going into this. As a matter of fact, my mocks were very... they were bad, basically. The team was experimental. I didn't have as much time as I'd like to prep, and I didn't really like the team this week, so I just kind of went into it and did as best as I could, and tried to use like the one mock I had. I ended up, like, the Rhyperior set ended up working. But then another one, Scarf Chomp just kind of blew me away, so I knew that in the back of my head, like on one end, if he was Z Garchomp, Rhyperior worked. But if he wasn't and he was Scarfed, then it didn't work. But I also knew that, like, Meloetta ended up working in a mock, and then so, like, my setup it had potential, but it also required, you know, certain type of team archetypes from John's end. So I end up going for Shadow Ball, and as he's moonlighting, knowing that he can live any of these, because I'm not a +1 or +2, and even then it was still a 2 KO. So, but I end up getting special defense drops, which I'm not really, like, banking on. I just was getting them, and at this point, when he goes for second Moonlight, the Shadow Ball to max HP, max defense, Cresselia is doing like 60 to 81%, as I'm still alive from this last round of Toxic, and it just means that I can get him down super low. So this will, I believe, net me a kill. Let's see. I'm just moving along because there's so many damn after turn effects. No, I just end up going for another Shadow Ball, as, you know, I hit Garchomp, and right here, like you see, yeah, I got like 3 special defense drops in a row, as I'm going to die off the Toxic, and he's going to keep Cresselia alive, obviously, for differential purposes. Because, I mean, at this point, John is 6-2, and he needs to stay alive, or he needs to stay ahead of Mono, or pace with Mono, Chimp, and Gator to stay in the playoff race. Right here, I'm just going to Swallow, hope he's not Scarfed. He ends up being Scarfed, I lose. That's the bottom line. As you guys couldn't hear from the tonality of my voice throughout this entire match, I really didn't have a good way of winning in this match. I had ideas, I had things that worked sometimes, but overall, I think John just prepped really, really well. The Toxic was really, really smart on his end. He, you know, having 3 things with Toxic, having AV, having Scarf Chomp in the back, and having just Jolteon for a nice cleanup mon. I really didn't have much to do, frankly, and I lost. So, you know, GG to John. I hate the way that I lost, but I mean, I also talked to him afterwards. Hey, man, listen, if you're gonna beat me like this, you better fucking win the playoffs, because I'm not losing and then watching you lose to Mono, Gator, or Chimp in the playoffs. So, as a friend of mine, I hate that you beat me again. You do have my number. You've had my number for most of the GBA, and you know that kind of sucks, but it is the nature of this league, and I hope John does work in the playoffs. So, with that in mind, I'm just gonna leave. I really didn't have much to talk about in this match outside of my prep was kind of meh. It was a little experimental and didn't really work. But the nice thing is that up until the last week of this season, I have 2 matches that are very winnable. Aster, which I have some ideas and some really good ideas for, and then Necro Stevo. So if you watch this, thanks. If you didn't, no, okay, all right. And then I'll see you guys next week for Aster. Just wanted to get this out of the way so that I can start focusing on 2 matchups that I'm excited to play. Necro, getting to play Aster for the first time, and then a rematch against Mono, where there may or may not be food on the line again. But this one was more or less just, does it show that I can beat John, or do I get beaten by John? I got beaten by Toxic. So that's the match. Thanks for watching. You'll see a match tomorrow for the PPL, my first PPL upload. So I'll see you guys then. Yeah, bye.